Hi, everyone, and welcome again to Sunday Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your hosts, Noor Kyle, along with
the other one of your hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
And we, first of all, want to thank you for joining us. And we also, unfortunately, need to do our YouTube spiel before we get going. Mushtaq?
I take it that's my cue. All right, here's the spiel. Wonderful thing. First of all, we have breached the 300 subscriber barrier. We now have 301. And one of our new subscribers actually asked for a topic. And so next week, we are going to be doing a special topic per request. It is going to be on the secret hidden lines of the Enneagram and what they're all about.
Oh, yeah. Remember we mentioned that, but we did not delve into it when we were talking about the Enneagram recently. So that's what we will be up to next week. Thank you for that question, for that request.
Yeah, that was a good one. So we're going to give you everything that you never wanted to know about this. So if you are watching us on YouTube, please consider, if you are not already subscribed to us, to subscribe by hitting that little subscribe button somewhere down there and hit the bell, because then you'll be notified when we put new stuff up. And this year, we're going to be putting a lot more new stuff up. There is going to be stuff like you wouldn't believe, stuff galore.
Yep, and the plan is for both of us to be active together and potentially, as individuals as well.
Not potentially.
He's getting on my case this year, and rightfully so. It's time. So we can all look forward to that as well. I'll be doing more videos on my own. I'll be doing independent content. Of course, it's all going to be on the same channel. We are a team in this, and this is a community, so we're sticking around. We're in it for the long haul together. And so we've reached 300. That's a huge milestone. And that means we can just keep going, keep growing, and have a lot more to look forward to.
We are also going to be releasing new material this year. Some pretty exciting stuff. Plus, some of our favorites from the past are going to be re-released as stuff that you can download.
Some of the programs and workshops we've done in the past.
Yeah, so that's all coming up. And some of you are going to be getting special emails. So look out for the email that is entitled Cool Kids.
For the OGs of the Nine-Sided Circle. Yes. Yeah. Yep. All right. So if you've been following along with us recently, we have been doing this impromptu series over the past 2 weeks. This is going to be the third part. Previously, we've talked about money, sex, and today we're going to be talking about power. These are stumbling blocks, not only on the path as we walk it here, but in life in general. So this is important stuff to think about for us all. And we will be delving into that this evening. Mushtaq, you want to take it away for now?
I thought you were going to take it away for now.
All right. Where should I get started? Okay, so the topic of power is very complex. It's very nuanced in that, obviously, when we use the word power, a lot of connotations may come up for us. It's a word that, the word power is formidable in its own right. And there are ways that we can use power for the benefit of others and ourselves, or to their detriment and to our own detriment. So we will be discussing that as we go forward.
Yeah. So what is power, Noor?
Power, at least as we're defining it in our context this evening, is similar to energy. It's the ability to get things done. It is the ability to do, to achieve, to express vibrancy in our lives. Does that sound about right, Mushtaq?
That sounds about right. Now, there are a number of different ways that power can express itself. You can have power over other people in various different ways. You can have uh, positive power over others is called influence.
Mm,
Influence is, I mean, you can use influence negatively, but when you are using power with others, influence needs to be used positively. So, for instance, I might say to Jonathan, I might say, Jonathan, it might be useful for you to consider this topic. And if I have enough rapport with him, I'm going to influence him into thinking about that. And that is a form of power.
you got any thoughts about that, Jonathan? I saw you unmute yourself.
No, I was just preparing in case I needed to have a reply. But yes, I've had an experience of that only a couple of hours ago. So yes, it does work.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Cool.
So there's that kind of power, but the most important power is power over yourself.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes called personal power. But as we found today, that term is used by so many people in so many different ways that it's kind of become a little bit convoluted and cliche. Yes, definitely. You see it a lot with being used by motivational speakers and by people who are really into the law of attraction, which, as you may see on our channel, we have a complicated relationship with that, with the law of manifestation as it is typically presented in popular culture today.
Yes. Yeah, the law of attraction, or as it is more commonly known, the law of magical thinking.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
did I say that out loud? Oh,
well, I think it's worth saying, and I think it's relevant to this conversation. So yeah. Someone is having a hard time logging into our live this.
I think
this
that
evening.
Was Chris. Of course, yep. Chris lives pretty much in the middle of nowhere, maybe towards the ass end of the middle of nowhere. So internet is probably not as good as it could be, say, if he lived in a gigantic city or like.
Yeah, poor guy. Hopefully he'll be able to sneak on in here soon. Anyway, as you were saying, Mushta.
What was I saying?
We were talking about, well, we were transitioning from the talk about personal power.
Okay, so how do you know if you have personal power?
Do you have any thoughts, Nancy?
It suddenly occurred to me this was a difficult question for me to answer.
Yeah, I was actually, I want to encourage you to take a risk. Let's see what comes up for you.
Well, I mean, I was thinking that you might be able to tell if you have more personal power than you used to, because things that were difficult become easier. But if you don't have that contrast there, it's hard to say. I mean, if you're able to do things, you've got that much personal power.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, it may not be an absolute thing where it's just, I don't know, a thing that you have. It may be you have more or less of it, or you have it in different situations.
Right. And it is a thing that, as we'll find, it can be learned. It's not something that is necessarily innate and unchangeable. So it's important to think about that too. Good. Jonathan, did you have some ideas?
Yes. How about if I can actualize my hopes and dreams for my life, then I have good personal power.
I would have to say that's a bit 10-4 rubber ducky. You're absolutely correct on that one. That's a big one.
Cool. What do you think, Zainab?
I was thinking how to measure that, like what would be the measuring factors? For example, I'm able to do something now, but how can I know that I'm actually doing it? Or by the outcome? I'm not, might have a question here, but let me just simmer it a bit.
Yeah, no problem. We will come back to that, because as soon as you feel like that question has crystallized for you, feel free to share. Cool.
I will give you one thing that I'm pretty sure is a good judge for how much personal power you have, is that you have complete control over your yes and your no. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I mean?
I think that does make sense. I also think that may feel like a really high bar for a lot of people.
Yeah, and for me, that is the most fundamental thing. Your personal power is the ability to say no to what encroaches on your space that you don't want to, and yes to those things that you do.
So I think it's super common not to have that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody that we work with to have that.
I think it's a worthy goal, and I
Yeah.
think it's attainable for just about all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, that's incredibly important, especially the no part. Yes is not so hard most of the time, except for those people who think they don't deserve the good stuff.
Yeah.
But no is what allows you to define yourself.
To find the edges of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, I was once in a relationship where my partner just absolutely insisted that I should like the same things as her. And a lot of the things that she liked were things that I just was not interested in. And so we had discussions about this, and I had to make my no's adamant. No, I don't like this. I don't care if you think that it's the most wonderful thing in the world. I support you carrying that, and I am not going to take that on. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that is that for the person hearing no, I mean, here's where we really get into our yeses and our nos interpersonally. Like, that other person may be receiving your no as a rejection of them personally.
Yeah, which I'm sure was part of it.
Yeah. Yep. So in learning how to say no, the other side of that coin is learning how to receive no.
Yes.
Yes. And same goes for our yeses as well. Like, saying yes to things with a person who hears our yes and appreciates it, or is able to receive it at all. You know, are they a person that we can move forward on that yes with, whatever it might be? And if not, that's their no, and we need to respect that as well. So
yeah, and this gets us into a hot topic for this time in the world, which is affirmative consent.
yeah.
That thing.
I mean, we talked about sex last week, but as we discussed, I think we mentioned last week that there's a lot of overlap with power when it comes to sex, in that consent and self-expression, all of those things do require us to practice a certain amount of personal power.
Yes, it requires it of us if we're going to be adults in that area.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just sex. It's
no.
let's say I like horror movies, and Cherie doesn't like horror movies, and we're sitting around.
Cherie does not like horror
We're hanging
movies.
out together, and we're deciding what to watch on TV. And I say, we're going to watch a horror movie, right? I have not sought affirmative consent from her to do this. I have imposed my will upon her. And she has every right to say, hell no, we're not going to watch horror movies. I hate horror movies.
Is that what you would say, Cherie?
Yeah, that's what she would say.
Well, she just unmuted herself. I wanted
Yeah.
her to chime in if she wanted.
I was given a good lesson about that from Lawrence, and he said, when your instinct already says to you it's a no, and you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, he said, don't leave any time to it. Don't gap. So don't think about it. He said, you already know it's no, so you just go no. And I had to tell someone recently, I said, if you feel bad about that, you can say, no, not right now. No, not right now. So that it just gave them a little bit of space. And sometimes I use it when I say, no, not right now, because I don't want to even make that decision to do something or whatever. If Mushtaq wanted to watch that movie, okay, say, sure, you can watch that. Can you watch it at another time? No, I don't want to watch that, but can you watch that another time and we can decide something else? There's no rejection, but we seem to forget that we can negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. And so a no, when it's got a lot of time behind it, when you're being manipulated into saying yes to something, it gets more weighty, and that pregnant pause is pushing you into the other person's corner, and you hate it because you've just been manipulated. And it's like when someone says, oh, are you free this weekend? And you go, yeah. And then they ask you to do something that's just like going into multi-level marketing or something. You go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I did tell people, I said, well, thanks for thinking of me, but I'm not interested in that. And I do it straight away now, but I never used to be able to do it. But being told, I was actually pushing my own self into a corner because I had this feeling of not wanting to offend. And this is a very girl thing. Women do this all the time, don't want to offend. And we say yes to things. And I just say, no, thanks. But thanks for thinking of me. No, thanks. There's no problem with saying that. We always seem to try to make it a problem, but it's not. And once you do it your first time, you get a little bit of muscle about it. You go, yeah.
I mean, you make an excellent point about how when you like drag it out, it becomes heavier. Like, oh man, now it's weird that I haven't really expressed what I actually think now. And it becomes pretty intense. So I think that's an excellent point. Yeah.
The thing is, see, if you don't say an outright no, it leaves you open to being asked again and again and again, especially if it's something you really don't like. And that person got the message that you actually, this is just abhorrent to you. You weren't clear. So you paid the price for being powerless. You made a choice to be powerless. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
So, probably one of the most fundamental things about finding and exerting one's personal power is learning the power of no. I mean, what's his face? The really sleepy, enlightened guy talks about the power of now. And so we have the power of no, which is important because it helps to define you. No is the line between you and the rest of the world sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me, as I discussed previously, I've transitioned out of clinical therapy and I'm good now. But one thing that really sticks in my memory is my therapist saying, at the time, it was like I had no skin because I didn't know how to say no to things. I didn't know how to assert my own boundaries, so to speak, just like Mushtaq is talking about. And when we do start to practice saying no, we do develop that skin. Just as Cherie was saying, like you start gaining that strength to say what you need and what you do or do not want. And it's a skill that can be developed, as I've experienced for myself. So good call, Mushtaq.
Yeah. So with that, you need to be able to give other people that power too. The more you can give other people the power of no, the more powerful your no gets.
Yeah. Yep.
And here's some examples of how that can be done. We're going to go back to movies again. Nora and I might be sitting on the couch staring at the screen, and I might say to her, how would you feel about a sci-fi movie tonight?
How would I feel about that? I mean, right now I'm feeling like maybe. That's an honest answer.
Yeah. So let's
Yeah.
say you're not feeling it you're not. And if you're not, I've just given you the encouragement to say no.
Right. Just like Sheree was saying, that no, not right now.
Yeah. And
'Cause-
then
Yeah.
because I asked in the way I did, I have to take that in.
Right.
As
Yep.
opposed to saying, hey, let's watch a sci-fi movie. Then
Yeah.
I put her in the position of having to say no, as opposed to just expressing her desire.
Right. Or like me with him, like, I want to watch Queer Eye. We're going to watch Queer Eye tonight. Instead of you like, how would you feel about watching an episode of Queer Eye? And then he has the opportunity to respond. So
Yeah.
we have been watching a lot of sci-fi lately. Good stuff.
Yep. And some Queer Eye.
Yes.
That was
Yep.
that last episode was a particularly good one.
Yeah. I like the reboot. I like it a lot.
Yep.
Anyway.
Anyway, back to power.
Mm-hmm.
So power is the ability to do. Right now we've talked about the most fundamental ability to do, which is the ability to do no, to define your boundary. It's not you can't be a Republican because I hate Republicans. That's not your damn boundary.
No.
No, your boundary is I'm going to do this. I don't want you to do this. I don't care if you don't want me to do this. This is what I'm going to do.
Yep.
That's your boundary. A lot of people don't understand that boundary, and you have to be able to enforce it as necessary. Other people's ability to choose for you ends at your skin.
Yeah. Yep. There's some heavy stuff in there.
There's some very heavy stuff in there. I used to live in Tanzania, and I taught school there. I taught college. And I taught two things. I taught computer graphics and that sort of thing.
Yes.
That's Chris again. And I taught English. I hadn't originally intended to teach English. That wasn't part of it, but one of the school's two English teachers disappeared, just vanished, which happens in Tanzania. And the principal of the school, the dean of the college, was freaking out because he had two classes of English as a second language for business, and no one could teach it. And so I thought to myself, you know, as it happens, I'm a native English speaker. I could teach these classes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I took those classes on. And they were the best classes I ever taught. They were all women in both classes. They were all Africans. In my computer classes, it was probably 80% Indians, because there's a lot of Indians that were brought over during the time of the British Raj. But in my English classes, it was all Africans, and it was all girls who were training to be secretaries. Now, in Tanzania, being a secretary is a big deal. It's a well-paying job. And I had great fun with this class, and I am pleased to say that my students came to like me, which there were a lot of reasons for that. But in one day, we had a conversation in class when one of the students that I had really good rapport with said, "Teacher, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure. Can you ask it in English?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Is it okay for your boss to demand to have sex with you?" And I was like,
I'm not sure I remember this part of the story, so damn.
yeah, I don't think I've told you this one.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and we then had and the entire class became a discussion between me and these 23 girls who were, in their late teens and early 20s about your right to say no to bullshit like that. And your right to get your brothers and uncles to go and beat the crap out of your boss if he tries to do that kind of shit to you. Because it turns out that sort of thing was epidemic over there.
That's rough.
Yeah, it is rough. But I like to think that I maybe quelled the epidemic a little bit. Because they were all like, "Yeah, we don't have to put up with that."
God, I really hope so.
Yeah. So
yeah. So I'm just thinking ahead. This touches on not only personal power, but what we want to talk about next, which is like personal power versus power over others.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Bosses have power over you.
Yeah.
What you have to remember is that you have consented to that power being over you. There is nothing inherent about that.
Yep. We've talked a little bit about that with teachers as well in the
Yeah.
past. Yeah. Yeah. You consent to taking someone on as a teacher, they consent to teaching you, and there are parameters of respect that must be upheld within that relationship. So if we're talking about a boss and a secretary, I mean, ideally, it's exactly the same thing, where
Yes.
you are upholding respect for one another, even as part and parcel of consenting to this particular relationship of employer and employee.
Yeah. So it gets scary when somebody has the power of life and death over you.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent or another, because money is such an important part of living in the world, having money. And if you think, "Oh, this person can take away my money, my magic tickets with which I buy food,"
Yeah.
that can be very scary.
No, I was thinking about, you were saying about being able to say yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Now, suppose that a police officer pulls you over. You could say no, or I guess indicate no by refusing to pull over, but this.
Well, this is where
could be-
personal responsibility comes in.
Mhm.
You have a certain set of explicit agreements that you have made with your country. When you get that driver's license, you agree to certain things. And one of the things that you agree to is being pulled over by the cops. If you're doing something like speeding or running a red light or anything like that, that is the agreement. So you can choose to break that agreement, but there will be consequences. Now, at the same time, there are things that the cops don't get to pull you over for. And if they do pull you over for those things, you're well within your rights to give them a hard time if you feel appropriate. And we see that all the time with like, oh, you don't live anywhere near a border, so you'll never have experienced this, but the Border Patrol sets up roadblocks just to ask people if they are US citizens, which is not legal. I mean, you are not required to answer that question. And I have upon occasion said, my status as an American citizen is none of your business. And they say, we have the right to ask. And I say, yeah, you have the right to ask. I have the right to say, I'm not going to answer. Then I start with, am I being detained?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, being an old white guy, it scares them some. You know, if you're a 20-something Latino looking person, they're going to give you a hard time, but they're not going to give me a hard time. They're going to collapse. And it's like one of the times when I can use my white privilege for good. Because that kind of shit needs to be challenged.
Yeah.
So, power over.
Yes. So we've talked a little bit about power over already, and I think likely all of us have experienced it at some point, you know, being put in a position of realizing there are reasons to be afraid to say no, or to be anxious or feel uncomfortable about it. And perhaps there are repercussions that we are trying to avoid by backing down from a confrontation. And that's a big deal. And at the same time, we also have incidences where we may be in a position of, like Mushtak just talked about, privilege. So let's say we're in a situation where we are aware that we have what would be called systemic privilege in activist jargon. And so we might feel like when someone comes at us in an accusatory way, we have to kind of just like drink in their aggression at us. And perhaps we aren't holding them accountable for their own behavior because we feel like we kind of need to suck it up. In that position, we are kind of not treating them like human beings. You know, we are not allowing them to express their full selves as adults. And at the same time, they're not holding themselves accountable. They are using the leverage of power over them as a way to kind of like flip the tables and have power over the person that they're talking to. This has been called power under. And I think that's something a lot of people have a hard time talking about given the social context that we live in right now. But as we talk about a lot in the nine-sided circle, it is so important to think about subjectivities rather than treating people as objects. So this is certainly relevant to that kind of conversation. What do you think, Mushtak?
Yeah, I am minded of a conversation I had with somebody a few months ago about racism.
Mm-hmm.
And how that person was insisting that only white people could be racist.
Yeah, and that's a hot conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also Orwellian doublespeak. because in order to come to that conclusion, you have to redefine what racism is. And within certain areas of the hard left, they have done this very thing in such a way that only white people can be racist, which excuses the behavior of every non-white person in the world as they act in a racist manner.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I see where you're coming from, and I also understand the context in which the term racism is typically used today. And I think it's a both and scenario where ultimately the important thing is who is having their subjectivity recognized. And if we are lumping people into one collective group and labeling it in such a way that there is no room for nuance and for humanizing, then that becomes a problem. And I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and my point of view is, if you can't say this about brown people in general, and black people in general, and red people in general, and every other color in general, you can't say it about white people in general. Generalization is poison.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's used as a way of assuaging frustrations, which are valid, but I don't think it's, it's catharsis rather than productive per se.
Well, it's also used as a way to gain power over others.
Yeah.
Without admitting it.
Without admitting it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
and we can see the same thing in like heterosexual cis relationships where a woman is using, let's say, we typically view the woman as the one having quote unquote less power in that setting.
We do?
Society often does, yeah.
Okay.
And let's say she's using that assumption as a cover for her to abuse him, let's say. And that becomes really messy. It's kind of disempowering for the both of them. And it's abusive. So ultimately, this is why it's so important to talk about just how complex the issue of power is and how many facets there are to it. How do we use it so that we are, ideally, we are not intending to cause harm to others. We're intending to bolster ourselves, and in so doing, build up those around us as well. And to support them in a way that is non-coercive, ideally non-violent, all of that stuff.
And then we get to the most important part of this topic, which is spiritual power.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. What about it, Noor?
What about it? Oh my gosh. I don't know where to get started on that much talk, but you get started and I'm sure I'll have things that come up.
All right, that's only fair. I am putting her in a position of power, whether she wants to be in it or not.
Yes, I appreciate that.
So, spiritual power has two sides. The most important side is the spiritual power you have over yourself. The power to say, this is my path. And without that, you get nowhere. This is not something that anybody else gets to tell you. So, for instance, I might say to Zainab, you should be this kind of person. And she gets to look at that and go, no, I don't think so. I don't think that that's me. That's part of what is important for your own spiritual power, to trust in your ability to choose for yourself what is best for yourself. Now, the other part of that, though, is to know that you don't always know what's best for yourself. So you get to lend part of your power to your teachers. You notice the important word here is lend. You don't give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
You never give power to your teachers. You can lend it for a little bit, but it has to be returned to you. And if you have a teacher who welches on that loan, you don't want them. Trust me on this. Does that make sense to you?
What do you think, Shri? I saw you nodding your head. Does that make sense to you? I know you don't want to chime in. That's fine. I'm just...
You can type.
It's too slow. I was just thinking about all the different types of spiritual paths that I've walked on since a child to now, and it's difficult to surrender something that you've been in for a long time, because sometimes you feel like it's better the devil you know. But when the teachings become onerous to the point where you can't possibly follow that, it behooves you to pay attention and change that path, and it's a really tough thing. People who are caught up in that, it's a hard one. It's what wars are fought about. It's what breaks up families. It's divided my family. The things that have been described of myself, I choose not to believe what they say about me, because I want to be true to that authentic nature in my heart.
Yep.
I've to follow the norm of how I was supposed to conduct myself, because this is how number one daughter in a Chinese family is supposed to behave. And every time I broke it, it was so hard. The pain, it is pain that you have to endure, and realize that's part of what makes you spiritually stronger.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Relatable, Shri. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So here's the idea. Part of your power, your personal spiritual power, is the power to lend your authority to someone you trust to give you feedback. This is the job of a teacher. A teacher's job is not to push you around or to force you to do anything or to make you behave in a particular way. The teacher's job is to give you feedback that you can evaluate and then try out or not.
Yeah.
And this can only be done through permission. That permission is the lending of your power to somebody else. And the thing is, if the teacher is good, they will return that loan with interest. Think about what that might mean. Zainab, do you understand what that means?
I do. I guess that's the reason Nine-Sided Circle has that circulation. And
That's a really nice thought. Thank you, Zainab. I appreciate hearing that a lot. And Shri says, that is why I am still here. Yay.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Because that is so important to us. And I think it's part of why we started this in the first place, because it is about that reciprocity of power that we're talking about. I mean, if we want to talk about it in relevancy to this discussion tonight, we see how easy it is for a teacher of any kind to hoard power. And that is definitely disturbing to us, and it's something that we're not interested in. So how do we push back against that? One way is to model something different. So that's what we try to do.
Yes, we are definitely trying to do that. And it's hard because everybody will tell us we're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that we're doing the nine-sided circle wrong?
We're doing it wrong.
Yes.
Because how are we doing it wrong?
If we were doing it right, we would be charging everybody for the privilege of being part of this. We would not be giving everything away for free that we do on YouTube. We would be making wild claims about what we can and can't do, and we would be using the hard sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, we do little sales and we sell a little stuff here and there, and we do private consultations and stuff, but that is not the core essence of what we do. I mean, the goal is not to get rich. It is to do sustainable work that helps us thrive, but we intend for that to feed us in feeding others. Yeah. If that makes sense.
And you know, it's the thing is, if we wanted to make millions and millions of dollars doing this, we could.
Mm-hmm.
We know how to do this.
We learned a lot lately about how to do that.
Yeah.
It's to the marketing program we're working on, but
yeah, but we have skills to do that kind of stuff. It's just that kind of stuff does not produce the results that we want.
Right. Ultimately, that's the upshot.
Yeah, we're very, in order to have real power, you have to be very clear on your goals. And the goal of the school is not to make money. I mean, making money is a nice side effect. The goal of the school is to produce teachers, and not teachers that will teach our curriculum, but teachers that will teach their own curriculum from their own place of awakeness. Because that's how the teaching proceeds. The teaching does not proceed by doing the same thing over and over again. The teaching proceeds by new teachers expressing what they know in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes a group like this powerful. We will never have 1 million followers. Hopefully we'll never have any followers. Because who needs followers?
Yep.
But what we will have is people who can do. Each of you is in a position of becoming more and more powerful and being able to do. And not do in our way, do in your own way. I mean, Zainab may discover that her method of teaching has a lot to do with carpets or art or both. And I couldn't sell a carpet for the life of me. So she's going to have to create her own method that way.
Yep. Yeah. And even between you and me, Mushtaq, like, we've moved to a point where I am co-teaching with you. We are also students of each other. And despite you having been my mentor and in some ways continuing to be my mentor, we do things our own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you tried to do things my way, you would keep bumping your head. Or I would keep bumping my head if I were doing them your way, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So, and if you guys have students of your own, it'll be the same thing. It'll be the same thing where we would hope that the goal would not be to create clones, but to create independent, powerful people in their own right.
Yeah, if you try and create clones, your branch of the school will not exist beyond one generation. If you teach people how to be themselves and to teach from their own place, the teaching continues.
Yep.
And there is no system.
Not here. Nope.
No system.
Not how we roll.
So there's a few ideas on power. We haven't given you any lists of things that you have to be powerful or anything like that. Just hopefully some ideas. And I will tell you that if you want to be truly and utterly powerful, you've all heard of the laws of attraction, right? The laws of attraction are not going to make you powerful. What is going to make you powerful is what we call the law of due diligence. The law of due diligence teaches you what you have to do to get the universe to agree with you. And when the universe agrees with you, you are ultimately powerful. So we're going to put a link or two somewhere up here at the end of this to our talks on the laws of due diligence, just because it would be really useful for everybody to know about these things.
Yeah, and we mentioned the law of attraction earlier, manifestation, whatever. So this ties very nicely into that. Why we have such complicated feelings about it is because of this, because of what we're talking about right now. So
see you later, Zainab.
Bye. All right, so do we have any wrap-up thoughts? You guys have any thoughts you want to share before we log off?
Well, a couple of them.
Yeah, go for it, Nancy.
One of them is a large topic, which is power and children.
Power and children.
Power
Yeah,
and
that's
children.
a big thing. But what are you thinking of? If you want to elaborate a little bit, you're welcome to.
Well, sometimes adults want to just get things done, and they can want to, in some way, not respect a child saying no.
Yeah, it's complicated there. Yeah.
Yep. The problem with children is that they're children, which means they are not fully developed and have not reached a point in their lives when they can take authority over themselves. Just from a neurological point of view, their brains are not developed yet.
Mm-hmm.
So while you are a parent and you have a child, it is incumbent upon you to say yes and no for the child until they can say yes and no for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it is equally incumbent upon you to teach them those skills.
I was just going to add that. Yeah, they still need practice at doing those things. Yeah. Yep. And then
but when you're dealing with, say, a 6-year-old who's, if their yes is yes to all the candy in the house, and their no is no to the broccoli and peas, you have to make some choices for them.
Yeah. But if it's no, I don't want that stranger kissing me and hugging me, I think
that's a different thing.
We should hear that. Yeah.
And that goes to knowing what is appropriately yes and no for your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And it can
that's
be,
a very, very, this is a deep subject.
Yeah,
that-
it is.
and it can be more complicated than that. You know, like we sort of have agreement that candy is a treat and the vegetables are, you know, a necessity. But you can have some normal food that your kid is not eating because it's making them feel ill.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, that's a very nuanced, thing that's going to be individual to the child as well. So
And one thing, I'm just going to take a little bit of power by citing someone who is a horrible person who has an occasional sensible idea.
okay, go for it.
A fellow who goes by Mencius Moldbug.
Oh, I have not heard that one before.
And he has made the good point that Americans are prudish about talking about power. They don't want to talk about having it or wanting it.
I would say that by and large, that's correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Americans are prudish about everything. I mean, last week we talked about Americans being prudish about sex. The week before we talked about Americans being prudish about money.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't they be prudish about talking about power?
Yeah. Yep. So entangled with sex and money as it is.
Might even be part of the pathology in social justice.
Yeah, maybe.
Because
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a whole weighty discussion of its own, but certainly true.
And who's going to be the parent who says yes and no to all of us adults who haven't grown up properly yet?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
The answer is you have to be the parent that says yes and no.
Yeah.
You can get somebody to help you learn how to do that, but there ain't nobody but you. Because if you have somebody else telling you yes and no for you, you remain a child.
Yep.
I mean, you and I might sit down and go, let's see, what do you need to say yes and no to yourself about? We can talk that over. We can hash it out. We can look at all of the pros and cons of everything. But if I tell you, Jonathan, yes to this and no to that, you have no way to achieve your own adulthood. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. If we seek help, ideally it's a collaborative process. We may get advice, but ultimately the choice remains with us. So there's that. Dave, I hope you're doing okay over there. I'm so glad you're here. It's a pity that you can't join in, but I totally get it. So I think I personally have said my piece. I'm not sure I have anything to add. But I feel like this was a good conversation. Yeah, Cherie's good. What about you, Mushtaq?
What about me? I am powerful.
You are you? Well, I would hope so. would hope we all are able to discover our power in certain ways and start beefing it up if we feel like we don't have any. Just practicing those no's.
Yeah. And that gets to the one thing we didn't touch on is
What's that?
The basis of all power, the most fundamental of all power is violence.
Okay, so I feel like should we lean into that?
Just a little bit, just to say that is in fact a thing. Who was it? Chairman Mao said, all politics comes out of the barrel of a gun. Which is probably true. The thing about governments is governments have a monopoly on violence. and
Yeah.
they use it to maintain power.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
part of what we all have to do is to violence proof ourselves, at least a little bit. That's why I like people to study martial arts.
So that's one way to do it. Yeah.
That's one way to do it. Yeah. It gets into some very important things.
Yep.
So if you realize that the fundamental level of power is violence, I can force my will upon you, I can impose my will upon you, then everything else evolves from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave says better to be a warrior in a garden.
Yes, than a gardener in a war.
Yeah. And in terms of our day-to-day lives, again, it's not treating ourselves like objects. It's not treating those around us as objects, and ideally seeking relationship with people who recognize that we are full human beings. That's another way to avoid perpetuating violence either upon others or upon ourselves. Yep, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mushtaq. Very important.
Yeah, that's one that one day we may do a whole hour on.
All right.
Just because it's such an important fundamental part of all of this. And it's one of the reasons that in our tradition, it has always been said, avoid spending time with the powerful, avoid kings, avoid the politically powerful, avoid the rich, because their way is the way of violence.
So often true.
Well, we've seen that in our own country in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
I actually have two linked questions.
Okay.
Sure.
One is whether fear of power is related to fear of responsibility.
Could very well be. I'd have to
I think there's an argument for that. Yeah.
We'd have to have some concrete examples to say this is that, this is not that. But in general, I think that you would not be going far astray if you take that stance.
And the other question is whether a spiritual person could be the leader of a country.
It's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
It usually doesn't last.
Yeah. Do you have any examples, Mushtaq?
I'm trying to think of, I mean, there are some examples in Islamic history of, well, a good example is Salahuddin. He was a devoutly spiritual person, you know, who was tutored by Sufis and became a great leader. And, you know, used violence in his leading, but also knew how to curb the violence.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll definitely have to talk more about violence in itself on a future occasion, because that's a complex subject in its own right.
So that's kind of what we got for this week. For next week, we're going to be talking about another Enneagram secret. And it's one that I don't know that anybody out there is talking about. So, you know, we're exercising our power to tell you secrets.
Yay, secrets. Awesome. All right. So, I mean, this is the third part of our 3-week impromptu segment on stumbling blocks along the path and in life. And I'm glad you guys got to join us for all 3 of them.
Yeah. Probably the next time we do a 3-parter, it will be sex, drugs, and rock and roll or something like that.
Awesome. I look forward to that. Cool. All right. So I say we go on Brady Bunch mode and wave goodbye to everyone who's watching.
All right. So we are in Brady Bunch mode.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
Bye.
for coming. Bye.